All right, a delayed start, and nobody really expected this to happen. I didn't expect this to happen. Sometimes your plans that you all have in place doesn't exactly come to fruition. And I know not everybody's going to be tuned in here expecting this one to start at 9:15 tonight. Usually our time is 8:30. We're all set to go, but then sometimes things come up. And you change those plans a little bit. And I thought maybe we push back the live stream till Thursday, push it back a day. But then I was sitting here and I said, you know what? Let's go right now. Let's just go live at 9:15, get a good 45 minutes of Pitt sports talk in, Pitt basketball, Pitt football, and recruiting. Let's just do it on Wednesday night. So Wednesday night is our night, right? Wednesday night is the Panther-Lair live show night here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So why wouldn't we stick to it if we can? And, you know, people are starting to see the notifications. Of course, you know, things got kind of switched around. If you want to make sure you don't, you know, we typically are pretty strict to our 8:30 time. We typically stick to that unless there's a game that night or something really, you know, drastic that we have to adjust for, which hasn't happened very much over the past few years of doing these live shows. But if something comes up, which occasionally it might, you won't miss it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tonight is a great example, actually. You know, tonight is a great example of what the benefits of being subscribed, because if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you turn on your notifications, you get the alerts sent to your phone, then you would have known, oh, they're going live at 9:15. All right, let me jump on board. Let me check it out and see what is being talked about tonight on the Panther-Lair Show. So I see a few people trickling in. It's great to have everybody showing up, and I highly, Josh Newark says the emotions of going from 8:30 to Thursday night to 9:15, just can't take it. Haven't felt like this since a Pitt football coaching search. Yeah, I apologize for the switch arounds, you know, but I had to talk to you guys on a Wednesday night, right? I mean, we couldn't go to, I started thinking about Thursday night, and I was like, this is just be weird. It's going to be weird. I have different things I do on Thursday night. It's must-see TV. I don't even know if must-see TV is still on, but you know, whatever the 2023 equivalent of must-see TV. I mean, I'm just kidding. I don't watch TV at night. I write articles about recruits and Pitt football and Pitt basketball and all those things. Listen, while you're here, if you're here, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, go check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I think we have a lot of video-only fans or video-first fans, and I appreciate that, but you know, it really is all about the website. That's where all the coverage is. Pitt's got practice. You know, this week they're in the second week of training camp. They had practice yesterday. They practice again tomorrow and Friday. We'll be there with everything, reports on everything we see and everything that stands out. We'll have photos and videos, and all that stuff is right there at Panther-Lair.com. Recruiting updates, who was at practice, which prospects are they talking to. They got commitments and all those things. And we cover a lot of that here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, but we do most of it at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So make sure you go check out the site, and you know, I think you'll enjoy it if you do. So we'll do about a 45-minute show tonight. I think we'll go till about 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, that's my bedtime. I don't make it past then. If news breaks after 10 o'clock, chances are I'll find out about it in the morning when I wake up. But, I mean, first off, look, my mind, you know, pretty heavy on football right now, with Pitt basketball season ending on Sunday, and then you know, diving right into football spring practice, which they had two practices open to the media last week, or at least the first half hour or so were open to the media. They had a closed practice on Saturday, and then they're having practices this week. So there's been a lot of football on the brain, and you know, I mean, you see the slideshow kind of scrolling through there, guys like Phil Dracovic and Christian Bear and Mac Gonsalves and Blake Zabovic, you know, thinking about those guys and thinking about the storylines again, and kind of remembering what's going on in the world of Pitt football. It's been a contrast after we spent so much time over the last 4 months or so thinking exclusively about basketball. I mean, the focus was all on basketball for the last couple months, and then we shift pretty abruptly into football. But before we go fully down that road, and the reality is we're going to keep talking basketball over the next couple months too, as Jeff Capel works to add transfers and, you know, fill out the roster for the coming season. But before we totally close the book on last season, I mean, I think we could take a few minutes to kind of reflect on what 2022-2023 was. And we had so many conversations late in the season, that last week of the regular season, heading into the ACC tournament, so many conversations about a successful season and what constitutes a successful season, whether this was or wasn't a successful season. And when it was still up in the air about whether they would make the NCAA tournament, it was, well, can it be a successful season if they don't make the tournament? Do they have to make the tournament in order for the season to be considered successful? And I said it back then. I said it even before Selection Sunday, before the Notre Dame and Miami game, certainly, and before the Georgia Tech game in the ACC tournament. I said, yeah, this season was a success. No matter what we want to say or do or however we want to look at it, the season was a success by almost any stretch of the imagination. And while I'm the first to say, and I said it a million times, I've said it a million times, I said it a million times this season, I'll say it a million times again, that, preseason expectations lose a little bit, and preseason predictions and polls and things like that, they become less relevant as the season goes on and the team develops and you find out who they really are. Maybe they look better than you expect them to be. Maybe they look worse. Ultimately, you get to a point during a season, any season, where it doesn't matter anymore where they were picked to finish or how many wins they were expected to have. It becomes more a question of who are they now and what do we expect them to accomplish now? And I think by that measure, if you go January 1st, January 31st, mid-February, late February, there's a slight disappointment that they weren't able to win the ACC. They weren't even able to get a share of the ACC championship. So you have a slight disappointment there. But on the whole, I think even if you look at what the expectations morphed into, forget being picked to finish 14th in the conference. Forget even what the expectations had morphed into after the 1-3 start. Look at what the expectations were around January 1st, February 1st. The expectations were rising. They were climbing. And I think even if they climbed, and I think there probably were a few of us who went too far in how far we let those expectations climb. But even if the expectations climbed, I have to think they still reached those expectations and met and possibly even exceeded those expectations by making the NCAA tournament and winning a couple games. Now, granted, one of the games was a playing game, so if we told you, Pitt was going to win 2 games in the NCAA tournament, you probably would say, that's great. That means they're in the Sweet 16, and it didn't exactly work out that way. But, I think you absolutely would sign up for that success. If I told you that at mid-season, this isn't even playing that game where if I told you in October that they would accomplish this, you would take it. This is saying if I told you in January that this is where they would end up, that they would win 24 games, they would win 2 games in the NCAA tournament, they would, be one of the top teams in the conference right down to the end. Because, there was that too. Mid-January, late January, even early February, there were still questions. There were still murmurs of, are they going to hold on, though? They're playing really well, but are they going to collapse? Is it going to be flop-uary? I saw somebody use that phrase, flop-uary, because that's what's happened here before, that they've had some good stretches and then they fall apart at the end. Is that what's going to happen again? And so I think if we said, on January 15th or 31st or whatever date you want to pick, here's what's going to happen. They're going to be right in the mix for the ACC championship, right down to the wire. On the final regular season game of the year, the final game of the regular season, they are going to be playing for a shot at the number 1 seed in the ACC tournament, legitimately win, and you are number 1. If we had told you they're going to get to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 7 years, they're going to win 2 games. One of them is going to be a playing game that they kind of grind it out and gut it out and win by 1. And the other one is going to be a first round game where they win by 18 and the biggest seed line upset in school history. If I told you all those things, you would absolutely sign up for it. Never mind what you would have signed up for in October. You would have signed up for half of that in October. You would have signed up for it in January. In February, you would have said, I will take that. This season was an unmitigated success, and I don't think I'm actually trying to convince anyone here. I think we all recognize this. That was one of the things that was most remarkable to me in the aftermath of the Xavier game, was the perspective people seemed to take. People seemed to appreciate this season for what it was. And even though it was a disappointing loss and a game where they I mean, we're getting blown out for a significant percentage, a significant portion of the game. They missed opportunities. They had some chances actually to get themselves back into that game, potentially even win it and make the Sweet 16 as a result. But even though they missed those opportunities, I feel like there was a great sense of appreciation for what the team accomplished, not just in Dayton and Greensboro, but throughout the whole season. I think there was a general sense of satisfaction with what this season ended up being, which I think is pretty remarkable because perspective isn't something that sports fans are always prone to. Even the best of us are, in the immediate aftermath of a loss or a win, are prone to overreaction. The highs are never quite that high and the lows are never quite that low, but we certainly feel like they are right after a game ends. And so I didn't see that from Pitt fans. I saw, disappointment, for sure. Disappointment at a loss, which is natural, but appreciation that, this was a pretty good season. It was a great season. The best season in damn near 10 years. So good for them, and good for Jeff Capel, good for these players, good for the rest of the staff, good for the athletic department and Heather Lyke, And whatever means, whatever it was that led to Jeff Capel being the coach this year at Pitt, whether it was Heather Lyke's, unbelievable patience and belief and faith, or it was being hamstrung by a giant buyout, whatever it was, the result was the result, and it was worth it. I think it was worth taking the chance on seeing if this year it could be better than the past, 4 or 5. But it was. It was a lot better. And like I said, it was one of the best Pitt basketball seasons in almost 10 years. Now, as we talked about in the morning Pitt on Tuesday, I think it was yesterday, now Capel's got to go not rebuild the roster again, but to some extent, yes. He's bringing in 3 freshmen. Recruits, and he's going to have room for at least 3 transfers to go along with those guys, or 3 other additions, I should say. It could be transfers. You could find another high school guy late in the process. Find like a Federico type of situation, a guy who comes on the market that maybe you didn't expect in April, and you feel like you can add him. When do they get Dior Johnson? You can get these guys later in the process, so it's not necessarily definitely going to be all transfers, but my expectation is it would be mostly transfers. I think that's what they're going to end up with those other spots, and certainly in some key roles. I think they need another shooter. I think they need a veteran point guard. I think they need another shooter. I think they could really do with a veteran point guard. There's some confidence in Jalen Lowe and possibly Dior Johnson as lead guards. I think Dior might be more of a combo guard, kind of like Bub Carrington is. Whereas Jalen Lowe, I think, is the point guard in the group. But I think either way, no matter who you have handling the ball, whether it's Lowe, Johnson, Carrington, or whoever, I think you would like to have a veteran point guard in there. Another Nelly Cummings type, but maybe the Nelly Cummings type is a bit of a unicorn, at least in terms of getting him to Pitt, unless you have that unique connection that Cummings obviously had to Pitt and Pittsburgh. But to get another guy like that, an experienced point guard who can, not only help you win now, but serve as something of a mentor for some of these younger guards as they move. Because Dior Johnson's a freshman. He'll be listed as a redshirt freshman next year, but he's a freshman, effectively, just like Lowe and Carrington and Barnes and all of these guys. And so having a senior, a veteran who's been around, a 4th or 5th or 6th year senior who has played a lot of basketball, maybe been in the NCAA tournament before, and he's there to lead these guys and show them what it takes and how to play. I think that would be huge. Just to have like a Cummings or Burton or Sabandi back with this group, particularly Cummings and Burton. It's really unfortunate that those 2 guys are out of eligibility, because it would be tremendous for them to be around and show Lowe, Carrington, Johnson, Barnes what it actually takes. What it takes, not like the work you have to put in, the togetherness you have to have, and what a real locker room culture and chemistry, what those things really look like. You know, Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan's didn't have that. I mean, I guess Jared Wilson Frame was on the team when they got here, but I mean, they didn't have that guidance, that role model, that example. They stepped in and they were the guys who were setting the example. And who knows? Maybe if they had those guys, maybe it would have worked out. Maybe it wouldn't have. You know, maybe they still wouldn't have listened, or the message wouldn't have gotten through. Maybe it, who knows? But if you could have brought in a couple of these young guys with a couple of those old guys, Cummings and Burton particularly, I think it would have gone a long way. You got to hope that the culture is established now, though, with the guys that they do have coming back, with Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins, and Will Jeffress, you know what I mean, and Blake Hinson. Even though Will wasn't really part of it this year, he was part of it, but it's not like he was participating in practice or games, obviously. But you've got to hope that the culture that was established this year, and the chemistry and the understanding of what it takes to be a team and to win as a team, you've got to hope that carries over. That those guys who experienced it this year are able to take it in next season and establish it for that group, and really create that linkage that we always talk about. I always mention that Jim Calhoun said about Jamie Dixon's program way back when. And it was a real thing then, and it's something that this Pitt program needs now. You need to have that passed down. And if you can find the right veteran point guard and the right veteran shooter to come in and help establish it again with this group, I think you can really start planting the seeds. I think some seeds were planted this year. I think you can plant even more next year as you move forward, and try to keep building and doing more. Let's see. See some questions here. Remember, if you want to make sure your comments and questions get read, you can always be a super chatter, of course. Let's see here. I thought we had some basketball comments and questions. We'll get into football talk as well, for sure. Josh Newark says, is the expectation for Pitt basketball now back to yearly NCAA tournament bids, similar to your belief that Pitt football's floor should be 8 wins? I think Pitt should always be aiming to be that program that makes the tournament consistently. You'd like to get into a rhythm like they were in, where they were not only making it consistently, but sort of consistently winning 1 or 2 games every year, with the chance to break through even beyond that. But yeah, I think you want to build the program back to the point where they are making the NCAA tournament every year, where they are a regular participant in the tournament, and sometimes they have high seeds, sometimes they have low seeds, but they're always there. They're sort of a old reliable type of program, but I don't think that's a new expectation. I think that's where they always wanted to get to. They wanted to be competitive in the ACC, and they want to make the NCAA tournament. They want to be, consistently making appearances in the big dance. I think that has always been the expectation. Just because they didn't do it for the last 6 years doesn't mean it wasn't the expectation all along. I think Jeff Capel was hired to get Pitt back to that level and have that success and make the NCAA tournament on a consistent basis. So yeah, I don't think anything's changed with those expectations. Those are the expectations now, and they were the expectations before, and that'll be the expectation for next year. Now that Capel has won 24 games, had Pitt at the top of the ACC, made the NCAA tournament, that's what he's going to be held, that's the standard he's going to be held to. And he's going to be expected to succeed at that level again next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. So you hope that Lowe and Carrington and Johnson and Barnes are the real deal, and they play well, and they stick together, and you're able to add to it, and Brandon Cummings coming in, and Federico sticks around, and the Diaz-Graham twins, you get 3 or 4 years out of those guys, and you're able to really kind of build something year to year. Because then once you start having that success year to year, and you make yourself a relevant program again nationally year to year, that's when I think you can start recruiting at a higher level. This is what I always said. When Jeff Capel, maybe his recruiting wasn't great his first couple years after that first class, and people said, why isn't Capel recruiting better? And I said, look, at Pitt, at a program like Pitt, and others like it, you're not a blue blood, so you don't have that sort of brand to prop up your recruiting. So in lieu of that, you need success. You need consistent success, year after year success, just to keep you and make you relevant on the national college basketball scene. That's what you need to have. You need to be relevant. Kids around the country or kids in the area where you're recruiting, they need to know Pitt. Pitt needs to be a familiar school. And I think those years in the wilderness, those 6 years in the wilderness, that wasn't the case. Pitt wasn't relevant nationally. Pitt wasn't relevant on the college basketball scene. Pitt wasn't, they weren't prominent, and so they're not getting noticed. You need to be able to have sustained success in order to recruit better when you're not a blue blood. Blue bloods obviously want to be a blue blood and have that success, but they can still carry themselves through to some extent with the logo on their chest. You know what I mean? You walk into that gym with a Duke jersey or a Duke jacket, or a Carolina polo or a Kansas pullover or something like Kentucky sweatshirt. You're going to get noticed. You walk in there with a Pitt shirt in the middle of 6 losing seasons after they went 0-18 in the conference a couple of years ago, and you're just not relevant in the ACC. You're not near the top of the ACC. You're not competitive. You're not in the NCAA tournament. You're just a face in the crowd. And that's not a disrespect to Pitt, and that's not anything about Jeff Capel. I think he's a good recruiter. I think he relates to the players well and connects with the kids well. But Pitt and a lot of other programs, if they're not having that consistent success, they're just it's just another coach sitting there. You don't notice a lot of those shirts. But you start winning, you start getting back to the tournament year after year, you win the ACC maybe. You make a Sweet 16, you make an Elite 8, you start getting a little bit more notice. When that Pitt jersey, that Pitt coat walks into the, that Pitt coach wearing a Pitt coat walks into the gym at the AAU tournament or whatever it is, you notice a little bit more. It's not, there's a little more relevance there. And I think that's where you need to build back to. That's what you're trying to get to for Pitt. Let's see. Chris says, what happened to Hugley that he left Pitt? Pitt had a good year, and it seems a shame that he just left when the program was turning things around. So, John Hugley says he needed a fresh start, needed, mentally, physically heal and start over somewhere. And I kind of get that. I can understand that. I think there's probably a lot of baggage for him in here in Pittsburgh. He's been through a lot. He's seen a lot. Coaching staff has stood with him and stuck with him through a lot. John Hugley's not telling me the reason he decided to leave the team. He's not telling me the reason he needed to go in the transfer portal. I can't. The one thing that keeps sticking in my brain, and I try and think about different things. I try and think, about this or that to try to not just focus on this particular moment. But the one thing that sticks in my brain is the last game that Hugley played at Pitt. I think it was the Sacred Heart game. It might have been North Florida. It was one of those in that stretch there. And he came off the bench and played 10 minutes. And had like 2 points and 5 rebounds or something. Federico started, played a lot, and had a double-double. John Hugley never played another game for Pitt after that. He announced that he was going to take the rest of the year off for his physical and mental health and well-being. And then on the day of Pitt's first NCAA tournament game in 7 years, announced he was going into the transfer portal. The last game he played for Pitt, he was working behind Federico. Is that the reason that he decided to leave? I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm looking at it and saying he hasn't told me the specific reason. He hasn't made it public the specific reason. But he was playing behind Federico. And that's not a guarantee that he was going to stay behind Federico for the whole season. That's not a guarantee that he wasn't going to get back into the starting lineup. But at that moment, he was not in the starting lineup. At that moment, he was playing behind Federico. And then he was gone. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's not. But as I search for answers about what I'm trying to figure out why he might have left or how I would explain it or how it could be explained, short of a fresh start, which I think there's probably some truth to it, but a fresh start, maybe, looking for a spot where he could be the starter. Maybe he didn't feel like he was going to get back in front of Federico, which is kind of crazy to me because he was the centerpiece of this team heading into the season. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know for sure why he left. Let's see here. Oh, we got some football questions. I definitely want to get to it. And I'll tell you who's a big football fan. Our guy, Chris Gates. You know Chris Gates from chrisgatesfitness.com. The Wednesday live show, I've been talking to you about Chris for a while, but the Wednesday live show is sponsored by Chris Gates Fitness. You probably already know about Chris. I've talked about him a bunch of times, but if you're new here, Chris is an online fitness coach from Pittsburgh. He works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. He's also a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting the Wednesday live show every week. In addition to coaching, Chris pumps out brand new content every week about different topics related to exercise, diet, and how you can make sense of everything. Whether it's written articles, podcast episodes, videos, anything else, Chris's mailing list is the place to be. I get his emails once a week. I'm on Chris's mailing list. You should be too. He emails his subscribers once a week with all the new content that he has to share. You won't get spammed or sold anything. You just get super helpful information delivered right to your inbox. So go to chrisgatesfitness.com/newsletter. Chris Gates, Gates, just like it sounds, chrisgatesfitness.com/newsletter to get Chris's email every week with links to all the stuff that he's doing. So it's all right there in one place. And everybody who subscribes to the newsletter gets a free 21-day training and nutrition program for signing up. So go check it out, chrisgatesfitness.com, chrisgatesfitness.com. Big fan of Chris. Big fan of him supporting the podcast. I know he's a fan of Pitt and of the show, so we appreciate it for sure. Brian Ulrich says, or Ulrich, I don't know how you pronounce your last name. It might be Ulrich. I had friends in high school, high school, middle school, elementary school named Ulrich, but I could see how some people might call it Ulrich. But anyway, Brian says, talk about Narduzzi learning nothing from the quarterback battle last year. So, I don't know. Are you telling me to talk about it? All right, I will. Pat Narduzzi talked to the media yesterday. First time he talked in spring camp. And my first question to him was like this, because I thought about it. And I thought about it before I asked, and I've thought about it since I asked the question. I said, that last year was the first time in a long time that you've had actual quarterback competition, which is true, right? You had Kenny Pickett for 4 years. There was no quarterback competition prior to the 2018, 19, 20, or 21 seasons. So he had not had a quarterback competition since 2017. Fast forward to 2022, you're talking about 5 years. And so I said, last year was the first time in a long time you've had a quarterback competition. Were there lessons you learned from that experience that impact the way you approach this year's situation? Now, this was a rookie mistake by me. You don't ask a coach, you could, but you have to pick and choose your spots on a question like this to ask what were the lessons you learned. Because the problem with that question is when you say what were the lessons you learned, you're implying that there were lessons to be learned. You're implying that something was missing. You're implying that the coaches didn't know how to handle the situation and they learned lessons from the way they handled Keaton Slovis and Nick Patty. And some coaches, I don't know how all coaches will respond to that. Pat Narduzzi will spend most of the time saying, I don't know if we learned any lessons. Maybe I'm going to learn some today. Maybe you guys know the lessons. It's not what I meant. That's not what I was getting at. I was saying, how did a better way to ask that question would have been, how did last year's experience in a quarterback competition impact your approach to this year's situation? Now, I'm not one to say that I think Pat Narduzzi promised the starting quarterback job to Keaton Slovis, that it was predetermined all along. I do think he recruited Keaton Slovis to be the starter. He expected him to come in and be the starter. I do think that he kept an open mind about it. I think if Nick Patty was the better player in practice, Nick Patty would have been the starting quarterback. But I think his expectation, I mean, that's why he went to get Keaton Slovis. He didn't go get Keaton Slovis to be a backup quarterback to Nick Patty. He went to get him to be the starter. Now, if Slovis got outplayed, then that would be the case. And Pat Narduzzi has a history of changing quarterbacks when they need to be changed. And he didn't do it, right? So I don't go for that narrative that Narduzzi had already decided and it wasn't really an open quarterback competition and this kind of thing. I don't go for that. No. I don't go for that. But I do think he had to have come away with some... I can't imagine that Pat Narduzzi and Frank Cignetti went through last year's quarterback competition and didn't come out of it at least thinking a few things about how they approached it or what could be changed. And I don't know what those things are, but of course you're going to tweak it. Of course you're going to learn something from that quarterback battle. But if you're Pat Narduzzi, you'll be damned if you're going to admit to a reporter that there was something you learned about it. Or maybe you would, just with the question being asked a different way. Or maybe you would if it's a national reporter and you'll be more open and candid about it in that situation. But Narduzzi said there was nothing to be learned from last year's quarterback situation, quarterback competition. Okay. That's his take. That's his takeaway on it. Josh Newark says, question from earlier this week where Narduzzi said Pitt stepped up 2 years ago to increase the assistant coaching pay. Have we reached a point where Pitt won't lose coaches to lateral moves? They've been pretty good the last few years, I think, at holding on to coaches. I mean, really, I think if you look over Narduzzi's time, who did he lose? Matt Canada? Canada was the one guy who left for another job. I don't know if you would call Pitt to LSU a lateral move or not, but he left for another job. He didn't go to the NFL or anything. He left for another job, and Pitt tried hard to keep him. I don't think they worked that hard to try to keep Jim Chaney. I don't think they worked that hard to try to keep Josh Conklin. I think Pat Narduzzi was ready to move on at that point. If you look at the coaches who have left, I don't think they worked that hard to try to keep them outside of Canada. That's not to say they were all fired. Some were fired. I think Sean Watson was fired. Kevin Sherman was fired. John Peterson, Tom Sims were fired. Harley wasn't fired, but Rob Harley, I don't know. I imagine. See, that was tough because I think he went to be the defensive coordinator at Arkansas State, right? Is that where it was? Arkansas State, I think. And a coordinator job. And so that wasn't going to be available at Pitt. Now with Randy Bates there, Bates is happy. Narduzzi seems to like Bates. So Harley wasn't going to become the defensive coordinator at Pitt. And so it was sort of a move he had to make. So, I mean, I imagine Narduzzi probably tried to keep him, but I don't know how much he could have done in that situation. So really, Canada's the one guy that they've tried to hold on to and they haven't been able to. And even in that situation, they opened up the checkbooks pretty big. I mean, I think they went pretty heavy on trying to hold on to him and made a pretty competitive offer that I think they were willing to go to $1 million for the offensive coordinator, for Matt Canada, which, I think if Pitt is willing to pay that kind of money or even close to it, if they still get outbid, okay. I think there are probably less than 10 schools who legitimately cannot get outbid. And if there's a coach that they want, they will not get outbid. They might lose assistants, but they won't lose it because of money. They'll be competitive right down to the bitter end. And if a guy still ends up leaving, then he had other reasons. Either it was a job promotion or he likes the area better, or it's a different school, whatever it is. But they won't lose the guy because of money. For the 95%, the other 95% of schools in D1, eventually you have a ceiling that you'll hit. The question is, how high is that ceiling? And I'm talking about in terms of coaching salaries. You'll have a ceiling that you'll hit. And the question is, how high is that ceiling? And I think what Pitt has done over the last 10 years, last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, that ceiling has continually raised. So when LSU comes calling for Matt Canada, Pitt is able to make a really competitive offer. They make a really competitive offer to try to keep him. Ultimately, they hit the ceiling, but it was a higher ceiling than they've had just about ever before for an assistant coach. It probably was the highest ceiling they've ever had for an assistant coach. And so they hit the ceiling. LSU kept going. LSU wins. But in the last few years, guys like Charlie Partridge, Corey Sanders, probably Archie Collins. I mean, these guys, it's not like they're not in demand. You can't have the kind of success that Pitt has had, particularly at those positions, and not have these guys get opportunities to go other places. And they have. They've had those opportunities, but they're all still here. They're all still at Pitt, and I think that's a testament to what Pitt has done in terms of raising that ceiling to pay more, to be willing to pay more, to hold on to assistant coaches, and it's paid off because they've held on. They've kept those guys, despite some competition. Chris Beatty left, but he left for the NFL. Brennan Marion left to go to Texas, but I'm pretty sure everybody was willing to part ways on that one. Who else is left? Mark Whipple left, but that was a year later than he was expected to leave. I don't think that's not. I don't think there was a bidding war, I guess is what I would say on that one. And so really you look over the last 4 or 5 years, 3-4 years, the guys they've lost, they haven't, it's not like they've lost guys in that way. And I think they've kept many more guys than they've lost in these last few years. So, and that is a sign of, obviously you need the athletic department support, you need the athletic department behind you, but you ultimately need the people who sign off on these things in the cathedral. You need lower campus, as they're called. You need the university administration to approve some of these budgets, because the head coach can go to the athletic director and the athletic director can say yes or no. But then ultimately that has to come out of a budget that's approved by the university. The university has to ultimately sign off on the entirety of the budget. And you need that support. And that's probably one of the biggest things that Pitt has going for it right now, is the support from the top. The top of the administration is fully behind athletics, as much as it's been in a long time, maybe ever. They're spending like $500 million on the Victory Heights complex. $500 million. Is that the number that keeps going around? $240 million? They didn't raise all that from donations. They don't have people lining up to donate $12 million for the Olympic Sports Complex. And it's needed, and Pitt will very much benefit from it, and Pitt sports will very much benefit from it. But the university's eating a lot of that cost. I'm not breaking any news here. I don't think anyone was under the impression that they raised a $240 million, capital funds campaign. They raised money for it. I think Pitt fans did donate to make it happen, but not the whole thing. The university's support for athletics is there, though, and not just football and basketball, but the athletic department. And so I think that's huge. And when we talk about, maybe something of a high point for Pitt athletics right now, where things are really humming along. Football program's been in good shape for a couple of years now. Basketball program finally has a good year. So much success happening in wrestling, in volleyball, in both soccers. You got a lot going well right now, and a lot of credit. There's a lot of credit to go around. It's credit to the coaches and the student athletes, obviously, first and foremost. There's credit to the athletic department, and there's credit to the administration on the top, who kind of signs off on everything. Because if you don't have that support, you're not going to be able to have the resources to be successful that way. And so, big ups to the cathedral, if you want to talk about why Pitt athletics is doing what it's doing and as well as it's doing right now. Let's see. Chris is a super chatter. Says, Chris, the Pac-12 is close to folding and the ACC is locked into a bad long-term deal. How much pressure is there to win to get an SEC Big Ten invite? I don't know if winning is going to do it. All right, let's go to an imaginary world where Pitt beats Georgia Tech and Louisville last year. They go 10-2 in the regular season. They go to the ACC championship game and they beat Clemson. And they're 11-2, and they're either in a New Year's Six bowl or they sneak in. I guess they probably wouldn't sneak into the playoffs, but they're in a New Year's Six bowl again. At 11-2, they win. They go 12-2. They have 23 wins over 2 seasons. They're back-to-back ACC champs. Cream of the crop. Best program in the conference. Top team in the conference. 2 years running. They don't. Where have they been? The Orange Bowl this year as a New Year's Six, as the winner of the ACC championship that didn't go to the playoffs. They're not flying back from Miami. Or let's put it another way. The SEC is not meeting them in Miami after the game and inviting them to the conference. It's not as much about win and get an invite. It's about proving value and showing value. And part of that is victories and success, because you generate interest that way. But part of it is just, what kind of value do you bring? Does including your school in our conference allow us to get more money out of our TV deal? Are you that big of a brand? Do you have that kind of a market that we can get a new TV deal by adding you? Get a new TV deal by adding Texas and Oklahoma. Get a new TV deal by adding UCLA and USC. Could we get a new TV deal by adding you? And that's what you have to prove. More than the wins and losses. And look, the more you win, the more attractive you will be. But you need to be able to prove your value. You need to be able to prove that you can generate revenue. That's the trick. Let's see. James Toomey says, I just canceled my daughter's guitar lesson for tomorrow night because I thought you were going live tomorrow now. I'm sorry, James. I really apologize for that. Hopefully you can get it canceled back or get it rescheduled. If not, I'll help teach her. I know a few chords. Does she know G and C and D? We can play a lot of songs with D, C, and G, James. So if you need a makeup guitar lesson, let me know. I'll help her work on D, C, and G. We'll get it done. But I apologize, and I apologize for the situation tonight. Pushing the podcast to tomorrow and then putting it back to tonight. Going back and forth about that. Something came up before the 8:30 show. Couldn't do it. Decided we'll just do it tomorrow because I wasn't sure what time I'd be available, and then realized I could get started here at 9:15. We could do a little 45-minute show here on a Wednesday night and stick to our somewhat regular Wednesday night pattern. So I apologize for anybody who got mixed up on it. You can always watch the video after the fact, listen to the podcast after the fact. And James, like I said, I can teach her a couple chords. I can teach her how to move between A minor and C. That always sounds cool. Let's see. General So's Chicken says, Pat Narduzzi should have learned a lesson from last year's coaching decision on the quarterbacks because Nick Patty should have been the starter, like I said all year, and he proved it in the bowl game. General So's Chicken also says Frank needs a mobile quarterback to succeed. I mean, mobile quarterbacks are always good. They always help. I don't know what Pitt's record would have been with Nick Patty. You don't know what Pitt's record would have been with Nick Patty, right? I mean, like you talk about, wow, we saw it in the bowl game, right? Well, the bowl game. Let's look at the bowl game real quick. I mean, we're almost we're running out of time here, but we can bring up the bowl game that you feel proves your point about Nick Patty. Pitt won that game 37-35, right? Their scoring came from field goal, touchdown pass, touchdown run, field goal, field goal. Now that was what? How many field goals? 1, 2, 4, 5? I thought it was 6. Was it 5? 1, 2. Let's look at the individual stats, shall we? 5 field goals, so that's 15 of the 37 points. Rodney Hammond scored 2 rushing touchdowns. Nick Patty went 20 of 41. That's less than 50%. 225 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Now, his heroics at the end, undeniable. He made big plays to help win that game, and I don't mean to take anything away from it. But I look at that game and I say, it's not like Nick Patty went out and dominated that game and went up and down the field for 375 yards and 5 touchdowns. All right? He was just okay. And sometimes not. And sometimes good, sometimes better. He had some big plays. There's no question. I'm not going to take anything away from it. But I don't watch that game and say, geez, I am sure that they win this game and that game. And look, the Georgia Tech game, he was hurt anyway. He wasn't even available for the Georgia Tech game. I forget if he traveled to Louisville or not, but I think he was still nursing an injury after the Tennessee game. So the biggest losses, the ones that made the most impact, I don't even know if they could have used Nick Patty in those situations anyway. Yes, Patty, it was great to see him win that bowl game. It was great for him to go out that way. I don't think it's a guarantee that they win more than 8 regular season games with Patty out there instead of Slovis. I don't. I don't know what happens in that situation. I just, it's a hypothetical. It's impossible to predict. I just don't think I saw enough to guarantee that, yeah, they definitely would have won this or won that. So I don't know if he made, like I've said often, I mean, Pat Narduzzi is not completely averse to changing quarterbacks. He's done it multiple times. He has benched quarterbacks. It doesn't feel like he has because for 4 years he had Kenny Pickett and he never changed the quarterback. And then he didn't do it last year. But his first couple years he did. A bunch of times. A handful of times. A couple times. A few times. But so I think if you go into this year, if Phil Dracovich's the starter and he ends up not playing well and Christian Veer is a better option, Veer will go in. If Veer wins the starting job and vice versa and, he wants to go to Dracovic will go in. I don't think there's a balancing act of when you change the starting quarterback, but I think Narduzzi will do it if he feels like he needs to do it. All right, I'm going to call this one here because I feel like I need to do it. I do appreciate everybody who tuned in here to the live stream again. I know we were on a bit of a different schedule, but I appreciate everybody being flexible. We'll be back at a regular Wednesday night next week, just like we always are, 8:30 to 9:30 for an hour. And of course, if you can't get enough, we've got the youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. So go check that out, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way, if you turn on alerts, you'll get a notification in case we do have something come up and we have to change times around or move days or something like that. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications. Like this video. We appreciate everybody who checked in tonight, joined the chat. It was a lot of fun, as it always is. I look forward to doing it again next Wednesday night. In the meantime, we'll have Morning Pitt episodes for you tomorrow and Friday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and every other day, Monday through Friday. So stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the coverage from Pitt Spring Football Training Camp in the South Side. We'll have lots of that for you tomorrow and Friday and beyond. And, like I say, Morning Pitt videos talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. So thanks again. Hope you've had a great week so far. We're into the second half of the week, almost to the weekend. So enjoy your Thursday and check out the Morning Pit. We'll talk to you there tomorrow morning, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.